The term gets used in spiritual circles with the kind of confident frequency that suggests everyone knows what it means. Light body, activation, Merkaba, crystalline structure. The language proliferates across traditions, teachers, and online communities, each one describing something real, or at least pointing towards something real, but doing so in terminology so loaded with cultural baggage and conceptual debris that the person actually going through the experience often can't connect what they're reading to what they're feeling. And what they're feeling is undeniable, a heat that has no obvious physical source, moving through the body in waves, concentrating in specific locations, arriving without relation to external temperature. A vibration in the limbs or the spine that isn't trembling, isn't anxiety, but is something distinctly electrical in quality. A pressure at the crown of the head or the center of the chest that isn't pain, but isn't comfortable either. A sudden, overwhelming sensitivity to everything, light, sound, other people's emotional states, as if the buffer between self and environment has become significantly thinner. And alongside all of this, often, a sense that something is happening that is larger than any framework currently available to explain it. This is not imagination. It is not spiritual performance. It is the body undergoing a genuine process, one that has been documented across traditions, mapped by teachers who went through it before the vocabulary existed, and is now beginning to be approached by researchers willing to look at what contemplatives have been describing for centuries. Let's talk about what it actually is. Part 1, what the traditions describe. Every major contemplative tradition has a framework for the process of what happens to the physical body during deep spiritual transformation. And despite arising in completely different cultural contexts, they share a remarkable structural consistency. In yogic traditions, it is the awakening of Kundalini, described as a dormant energy coiled at the base of the spine that, when activated, moves upward through a series of energy centers, producing specific physical, emotional, and perceptual effects at each stage. The heat, the vibration, the involuntary movements, the periods of extreme sensitivity followed by periods of profound stillness. In Taoist traditions, the cultivation of Jing into Qi and Qi into Shen, a progressive refinement of physical vitality into subtle energy into pure awareness, describes a similar structural process through entirely different language. The emphasis on the body as the laboratory of transformation, on specific physical sensations as accurate markers of the process, runs parallel to the yogic account despite no historical intersection. In certain Christian mystical traditions, particularly within the hesychast lineage of Eastern Orthodox practice, the theosis process involves the transformation of the body by divine light, described with precise physical detail by practitioners who had no access to Eastern frameworks. The warmth in the heart, the light perceived internally, the dissolution of the ordinary sense of self into something larger. The consistency across completely unconnected traditions is not coincidence. It is multiple independent observations of the same phenomenon, reported through the available vocabulary of each cultural context. What they are all describing, stripped of the specific theological interpretation, is the nervous system and the body undergoing a profound reorganization under the influence of sustained awakening. Not metaphorically, physiologically. Part 2, what is actually happening in the body. The physiological reality of what gets called light body activation is not as mystical as the terminology suggests, and not as mundane as a purely reductive account would imply. It sits precisely at the intersection of both. What is happening is a sustained, progressive reorganization of the autonomic nervous system, moving from the chronic sympathetic dominance that characterizes most adult human nervous systems toward a significantly higher baseline of parasympathetic coherence, with periodic episodes of intense activation that represent the processing and release of long-held patterns. The heat is real. It is metabolic. Energy previously locked in chronic muscular contraction and nervous system guarding releasing as thermal energy as the holding patterns dissolve. This is measurable. Practitioners in advanced states of meditation have been documented generating significant body heat through no external means. The Tibetan Tummo practice is perhaps the most studied example, but the phenomenon appears across traditions. The vibration is real. It is the nervous system moving through frequencies of activation that it has been suppressing, old patterns of held activation finally completing their interrupted discharge, producing sensations in the body that feel electrical, because they are, in functional terms, electrical. Neurological activation moving through tissue that has been contracted around it for years. The sensitivity is real. As the defended self softens and the filters that the nervous system uses to manage sensory input thin, more of the actual signal gets through. This produces what feels like heightened perception, because it is. The instrument is becoming more sensitive, which means it registers more, including things that were always present but previously below the threshold of detection. And the pressure at the head and chest, at the locations the traditions identify as primary energy centers, corresponds to concentrations of neurological and physiological activity in regions that are genuinely significant in terms of the nervous system's overall organization. The vagus nerve, the cardiac plexus, the brainstem. These are not arbitrary locations. They are where the reorganization is most active. Part 3 in the stages people actually move through. The process is not linear, but it has a recognizable texture, a sequence of experiences that appear with enough consistency across enough people to constitute a map, however imprecise. The first stage is activation, the initial awakening of the process, often triggered by a specific event, practice, or simply the accumulated pressure of a life lived in genuine seeking. This stage is characterized by the dramatic onset of the physical sensations described above: the heat, the vibration, the electrical quality in the spine, the sudden, overwhelming quality of the sensitivity. This stage is often the most frightening because it is the most unexpected and the most intense. The second stage is purification, a sustained period in which the body processes the stored material that the activation has begun to release. Old emotions surface without obvious trigger. Physical symptoms appear and resolve. The sleep architecture changes. The appetite shifts. This stage can last months or years and is frequently mistaken for illness, regression, or psychological crisis. It is none of those things. It is the body doing the most thorough cleaning available to it. The third stage is integration, a gradual settling of the activated system into a new baseline. The dramatic intensity of the earlier stages reduces. What remains is not the return to the old normal, but a new normal, characterized by a quality of aliveness, clarity, and sensitivity that was not available before. The perceptual sensitivity that felt overwhelming in the activation stage becomes, in the integration stage, a gift. The ability to read subtle information in environments and people that ordinary perception cannot access. And threaded through all three stages is something that the physical description alone cannot fully capture. A growing recognition that what is being reorganized is not just the body. It is the relationship between awareness and the body. The growing sense that what you are is not contained within the physical structure that is transforming, but is the awareness in which the transformation is occurring. Light body activation is not a spiritual achievement. It is not a reward for sufficient practice or a sign of particular advancement. It is a process available to the human system, encoded in the body's potential, described across every tradition that has engaged seriously with the frontier of human development. It happens to people who were not expecting it. It happens to people who were seeking it for years. It happens slowly and suddenly, and everything in between. What matters is not whether the terminology resonates. Light body, Kundalini, theosis, whatever frame makes it accessible. What matters is whether the experience is met with the quality of attention it deserves. Not panic, not performance, not the immediate need to categorize it within a framework that makes it manageable and familiar. Simple, honest presence with what is happening. The willingness to let the body do what it is doing without interference. The trust. built on the consistency of the accounts across traditions, that the process is intelligent, that the body knows how to complete it, that the discomfort of the transformation is not evidence that something has gone wrong. You are not breaking down. You are being reorganized from the inside out by a process older than any tradition that has ever tried to name it. And what you are becoming on the other side of the heat and the vibration and the overwhelming sensitivity has always been what you were. The activation is not creating it, it is uncovering it. If this gave language to something your body has been going through without a map, share it. Someone you know is in the middle of this process right now, frightened and alone, with no framework for what is happening to them. This might be exactly what they need to find. See you in the next one.